Truma. So all these parshiot, all 5 of them, talking about the Beis HaMikdash. And about the discussion of, it says in the pasuk in Truma, it says, Vasuli Mikdash v'shakanti b'tocham. He will make for me a Mishkan, and I will dwell among them. Right, so this mitzvah of making a Mishkan in the Shem says, I will dwell among them, among the Jewish people. So on that, we're learning this piece in Rabbi Yehuda, where what he describes is that what happened at that time, that was a culmination of the events of going out of Egypt, getting the Torah, and making the Mishkan. At that time, the divine presence came down into the Jewish people forever. Right? So now we have this national soul, the national Jewish soul, which is with us forever. And there are certain properties that manifest from this national Jewish soul, which is also called Knesset Yisrael, but is also called the divine presence, the Shekhinah. Has other titles. We call it Nishmat Yisrael, the Jewish soul, the Jewish collective consciousness, something like that.
National consciousness.
Very good. That's a good word also. So this thing that came down and through the process, Hashem created it through Aharon Avinu, through the Avot, and through the historical processes. So then we have this special national soul. So the special national soul we have manifests with special characteristics of the nation. So Rabbi Yehuda, he collects from the Gemaras and from the Psukim and the sources, from the sages, 5 examples of what's special about the Jewish nation. So I'll continue. I'll explain. I'll go back to them in a second. So first, I want to just give one more introduction here about why I think he's doing this. What's this about? What's Rabbi Yehuda sharing with us? I'll tell you something interesting. There's a sefer called the Drashot HaRan. One of the Rishonim, his name was the Ran, Rabbeinu Nisim. He lived in the 14th century. So he wrote a sefer called Drashot of Drashot. So in the first drush over there, he speaks about Kabbalah. And the Gemara talks about 2 types of Kabbalah. One's called Maisa Merkava, one's called Maisa Breshit. One's called the act of the Merkava of the chariot. One calls the acts of Breshit, of creation. 2 types of Kabbalah. So the act of the one kind of Kabbalah is called Maisa Merkava. That has to do with it's based around the vision of Yechezkel Navi. He saw these angels doing all this stuff, And then in connection with those psukim, there's like reams of Torah, of deep, secrets of Torah about the higher worlds, about the spiritual worlds, which the order of the worlds, everything that's behind our world and before our world. Now there's another type of Kabbalah called Maisa Breshit. And Maisa Breshit, it's based on what happens in Sefer Breshit. Psukim over there. So what the Ran explains is, so it sounds like, you look at it in the surface, you say, well, Maisa Merkava means the spiritual worlds, the order that's behind what we see, like the levels, they call it the Sefirot, all that kind of stuff. Then what's Maisa Breshit? So he talks about what is Maisa Breshit. He says maybe it means nature. He says the idea, maybe it means the world of nature, the laws of nature, So he rejects it. He says it can't mean that. Because if it comes out of Sefer Breshit, that's not what it says in Breshit. It doesn't tell us the laws of nature. You open up Breshit, Bar Elokim Hashemayim Va'aretz, and the first day did that, second day did that. It doesn't tell you how nature works. It's not a very good biology book.
If you're staring at it up close, I think it doesn't tell you, but if you look at it in a grand way, you can see that everything's got a pattern.
Oh, so 1 second. So yeah, but it doesn't tell you the pattern. It's not, if you want to learn science, you don't go to Sefer Breshit, Okay. It seems to be talking about not that. In fact, that's what we basically understand. We learn Torah. Torah is not a science book. It's not a history book. It's not any of those things. Even though it seems to describe history in some ways, and it screams this time maybe science in some ways, but that's not really what it's about. So therefore, the Ran comes and says that what is Maisa Breshit? What is this Kabbalah about Breshit? So he says it's like the reasons behind things. There's a reason why are things the way they are? Why is everything the way it is? Why do, I can give any example, like why do animals look the way they do and the plants look the way they do? Why do they function the way they do? Why things have evolved in the way they have? Why humans do what they do? Why we have hands, feet, eyes, ears? Why we think we want to walk and we start walking? Like, what's that about? You could actually, the scientists can start to measure how that works, like with neurons and thoughts and how one connects to another and things happen. Scientists understand a little about all that, how it works, but they don't know why it works like that. They don't know what's the secret, what's the essence of the things being the way they are. And, and like what's inside me, and what's inside you. Like we see the surface, we don't know the depths of our who we really are, of our essence, Why is a person the way he is? What is his essence? What's the essence of each person, How do we understand what life's about? So really what Maisa Breshit is about, what's behind everything? What's doing here? What's going on,
So it's looking to the essential relative reality. So like
the essential
the deeper aspect,
yeah,
the spiritual aspect,
yeah,
behind
exactly.
what we read,
Right.
behind what we see.
Yes, very good, very good.
Touch
So that's Maisa Breshit. So he says, so it comes out over there. So he says, the rest of the Ran says over there, he says that, so Breshit, these things can't be described by scientists at all. They don't have no idea why things are the way they are. They just describe from or really what's inside things either. What's their essence? The scientists describe the way they act, what they can observe. But why are they observing like that? Why are they behaving like this and not a different way? And what's behind all that? So the scientists have no idea. So who do you need to describe that kind of thing? He says over there that even like why things happen in the past the way they did, we don't know exactly. We can say maybe because of this and that, and we give ideas, theories, we don't know exactly. And we certainly don't know what's going on in the future, But he says, but the prophets and people with Ruach HaKodesh, the great scholars of Torah, can tell us what's inside things. They can tell us much more about why things are the way they are. So it's very interesting. So he said that's the Maisa Breshit. What's going on really? What's the essences of things? I remember just tell you a story, just a little tangent. Before I was observant, I had this experience that I went on a Shabbaton. I was in college. I went on a Shabbaton I think it was in Cleveland, near my college where I was. And I was staying at a Chabad house of somebody, a Chabad Chassid over there. And they sent us to this gathering where there were all these girls, like from, not really religious, just Jewish girls group. They were from America. They were there. I mean, that was America. I'm sorry. They were from somewhere. Like, I don't know, some kind of a girls' Jewish group. They weren't observant. They didn't know much. And I didn't know much. And there were other people there. And there's a Chabad Rabbi talking. So he was being very strong. And he was talking about Jews, the specialness of Jews, and this and that, separate from non-Jews. And the girls were objecting. They were saying, well, we have a lot of non-Jewish friends, and what's wrong with that? He was saying, no, that's not what it's supposed to be. They're not really your friends so much. And he was being very strong, And so I didn't like that also. I was very liberal. And so I said, well, aren't all religions like the same in essence, So he ripped me. So he looked at me, and he said, like, who are you to talk about essences? Like, what do you know about essences? You don't even learn. You didn't begin to learn Torah yet. And you're telling me about what the essence is. Like, what do you know about that? You're going to tell me about essences? Like he wiped the floor with me, It was wild. I was shocked. Whoa, he just like pummeled me, And so I was like knocked out for a long time. But what he meant was, I don't know if he should have done it so sharp, but maybe I wouldn't have listened otherwise. In any case, eventually I think maybe it sunk in. I don't know. It turned me off for a while. I'll tell you that much. But in any case, the essences we don't know. Without the Torah, without the great sages and the prophets, we don't know essences. It's all guesswork, The essence of the Jewish nation, the Jewish religion, the essence of other religions, essence of this nation, that nation, this person. Okay. So anyway, all that's introduction again to what we're talking about is now what Rabbi Yehuda is doing. He's talking about the essence of Am Yisrael. He's talking about what are the underlying characteristics of the Jewish nation. And that's something we couldn't know by ourselves. And no regular person can know by themselves. He learns it from the Gemara and from the earlier sources and from the prophecies, and they reveal to us what are the underlying characteristics of the Jewish nation. We can't see that by ourselves. We can see the Jewish nation do this, do that. We can try to make observations, but they're all very chitzoni, external. But to get down to what are the ultimate, the bottom line, internal characteristics of the Jewish nation, for that you need prophets and great sages. So that's what he's doing. So what he did, Rabbi Yehuda, he gathers from the Torah sources, and he's listed what you find there about the basic characteristics of the Jewish nation. So that's what we're talking about here. So, okay, so that's why I said that. So this is my separation, you call it that. It's something that we couldn't know by ourselves. But here it's being revealed to us. What are the characteristics of the Jewish nation? So what have we said so far is like this. We listed 5 of them. The first one, the first one that comes as 3. He called it Baishanim, Rachmanim, V'gom Nechasadim. The Jewish people, they have a sense of shame, and they have a sense of Baishanim, Rachmanim, of compassion. They're not cruel, and V'gom Nechasadim, and they do kindness with each other. That's the first set. That's how we deal with human beings, with other people. Baishanim, Rachmanim, V'gom Nechasadim. That's one thing about Jewish people. The Gemara says that if a person doesn't have, the person's really cruel, you have to check his lineage, because it's not Jewish. Okay, now, the second one he said, and the point is like this, what Yehuda is saying is that, why are we like this? Why do we have these qualities? We have these qualities because of what happened back then in the Mishkan, that the Shekhinah came down and dwelt among us. And we had, before that, going out of Egypt, we had before that, receiving the Torah, that created a national soul with these qualities. Okay, so that's the first 3 he said. Now the second ones he said, we spoke about already, were humility. There's certain humility to the Jewish nation. A certain ability to not exaggerate our personal credit, to attribute it to Hashem, Like for example, when Yosef got out of jail, and he was known as someone who could interpret dreams. So Paro brings him and says, I've heard you can interpret dreams. He says, if only Hashem will answer your Paro to understand his dream. Meaning it's not me. It's Hashem is giving me this power. So it's even when they're brought up to greatness, they pull themselves away. They have humility. What'd you say?
Yeah, humility. Yeah.
Humility. Yeah. Okay, that was the second one. And it says Yehuda said that's higher because the first ones are between a person and other people. Compassion, shame, chesed. But now the second ones are higher. That's humility. It's before other people and before Hashem. Mm-hmm. So that's even a higher level. Now he's going up in levels. So the third one, we said after humility, is faith, emunah. So emunah is built deep into us. We have this ability to believe that behind everything we see is order, truth, right? Hashem's system. It's perfectly in place. Even then, when strange things happen, we don't understand why. We have emunah. Yeah. Mm-hmm. So that's even a deeper thing, deeply embedded in Am Yisrael. Even Moshe Rabbeinu made a mistake about that. He said when Hashem told Moshe to go tell Paro that he's going to bring out the Jewish people, Moshe said, and that I sent you, Moshe, to bring them out. Tell them that I sent you to bring them out. Moshe said they're not going to believe me, because Moshe thought that they were so assimilated they wouldn't believe this. That actually the time for redemption had come, and they were going to be able to pull out and separate it from the Jewish nation, which they were, totally controlled by. So Moshe thought that they didn't have that emunah, but Hashem said, no, they have it. The emunah is so deep in them, even when they seem to be totally assimilated, they still have it. So that's the emunah. That's the third highest level, is emunah. Keeps going up. And so now, this week we're up to the next 2 ones. Yeah. So, so these characteristics, these are characteristics of the Jewish nation. Now, every nation has characteristics. There's a national culture of France, of Russia, of Germany, of Italy, Spain. They all have specialness, have greatness. They all have great characteristics. Okay, so every nation has a national soul, and we have our national soul. So what we're describing is the greatness of the Jewish nation.
The Goyim have a national soul?
Yeah. Each one has a sar. It's called, in other words, like a spiritual angel or prince, and that sar manifests the national character, and so they all have a character, So that's interesting, right? It's a good thing that, and each nation has a special character. You should know that Rabbi Yehuda says in one place that a nation is the natural, healthy way for the world to exist, because as a nation, they have a pride in their nation, and they're connected to their nation. They have a certain national characteristics that are very special, and they're critical to the whole thing. Now, to break down the nations is not healthy, which is what's happening nowadays. This making that it's a, European Union and world this, world that. That's not healthy. Okay. Anyway, going back to our subject. So our nation has these qualities. This is the national qualities of ours that we have. Let's go up to the next one. Yisrael Nevi'im. So the last two I want to try to cover today. So Yisrael are prophets. So that's the fourth level up. Now that's very lofty. That's even higher than Emunah. That there's something called prophecy. So prophecy is lofty. That this is a Jewish thing. That Jews had prophets throughout the generations. That we start with the prophet Moshe Rabbeinu. He was our prophet, and he brought down the Torah. And then throughout the generation, we had prophets that were encouraging us, guiding us, predicting the future, revealing what Hashem wanted from us. So this thing of prophecy is something very lofty, which is part of the Jewish nation. We had hundreds and thousands of prophets throughout the generations here in Eretz Yisrael. And that's very unique. Let's see what he says, Rabbi Yehuda. Hamadrega haravi'it, the fourth level. Bitnaseit me'al kodmata. It's lifted up higher than the other ones. It's elevated above the other ones. Ma'aminim, for example. The fourth level is even higher. Yisrael Nevi'im. Yisrael are prophets. Kedivrei Chazal beGemar Pesachim, as the sages say in Masechet Pesachim. Hanach lahem liyisrael im ein nevi'im nehem, b'nei nevi'im heim. It says in Pesachim that leave Yisrael, that if they're not prophets, they're the sons of prophets. That it means even when there's no actual prophecy, when we during the Galut, and when there's not the conditions for prophecy, so still there's something, we have something called B'nai Nevi'im. In the Jewish nation, the Jewish national soul, we have a certain sense that goes beyond what we see, beyond reason in the simple sense. We have something called prophecy. So even if we don't have actual prophecy, we're called B'nai Nevi'im. We have something like prophecy. That's why throughout the generations, there's different customs that have developed and different approaches to halacha, and the Jewish nation is able to sort things out as a nation. We're called B'nai Nevi'im. So this attribute of nevuah is essential to the Jewish nation.
Is that why there's so many different customs? Because certain communities followed, say, one Tana and a different Tana, and it's because that Tana saw for his descendants, that's what in Hagim they'll need. That's
a good word. That makes sense. Yeah, and also what I'm pointing out here is that the ones that the Jewish nations kept, and they stayed intact over generation and generation. So that's like the prophecy of the Jewish nation, like seeing what's really the most important minhagim, The ones that move aside, so then that's the Jewish nation sorting them out. So towards the Jewish nation as a whole has a sort of prophetic intuition, even when they don't have actual prophecy. And I like what you said also, that's very good. That would explain why there's different lines, because there are different angles of it. Very good, I like that. Okay, so yeah. So you see all throughout the nations. I'll give you other examples of prophecy, how you see that. Like you see prophets, they were able to do two things that I can think of. One thing they did is they did more than at least two things. But what they did is they would reveal what Hashem wanted. Right? So in other words, take a generation and how the generation is supposed to respond to what's going on in their times. So the prophets guided us. For example, I'll give an example in the time of Yirmiyahu, Hanavi. So the Babylonian Empire was coming to try to conquer the Jewish nation. And all the false prophets said, we're going to win. We should fight them and we're going to win. And Yirmiyahu said, we're not going to win. And we should surrender. And there's no chance of us winning, and that's what Hashem wants. And it's time for us to go into Galut. And a lot of people didn't accept it, and it was a big mistake. And Yirmiyahu was right. And he was telling us the way we had to deal with that situation, and that was Ratzon Hashem, that we should now go into Galut. You find in other situations where it's not like that. For example, in times of the Chashmonaim, right? When the Greeks were trying to conquer us. So then, I don't know if it was prophets then, but it was also Ruach HaKodesh, something like prophecy. They said, we are going to win. Even though we're outnumbered altogether, we should not give up. And now's the time to fight back, and we won. So who can tell you, who can cause those kind of shots? That's prophecy. That's prophetic thinking. And throughout the generations, you have this idea that we have in us leaders with at least our B'nai Nevi'im, if they're not actually Nevi'im. There's a certain prophecy, prophetic ability. I guess I'll go on a little tangent also here. I want to talk about Rav Kook and Rav Yehuda, because I heard this during the Rav Yehuda's yard site. I heard it from one of the speakers, the guy that speaks before Marav. He said like this, amazing thing. I was very amazed by this. He said, there's a saying from Rabbi Shimon Bar Yochai. And Rabbi Shimon Bar Yochai said to his son, he says, if Re'iti b'nei Aliyah ve'muatin, I've seen people from the Aliyah, the higher type of souls, and they're very few. Or b'nei Aliyah could also mean, this is the way he explained it, you have a house, it has 2 floors. The first floor is called the Bayit, and the second floor is called the Aliyah. So their B'nai Aliyah means that they have a higher view of things. They can see further than other people. So Rabbi Shimon Bar Yochai said, I've seen B'nai Aliyah, and they're few. And he said, if there's thousands of them, this is what Rabbi Shimon said to his son. If there are 1,000 B'nai Aliyah, we're among them. And then he said, if there's 100 of them, we're still among them. And he said, if there's only 2, it's us. This is Rabbi Shimon said to his son, Rabbi Lazar. Means we have a bigger view of things than, even though there are other great Chachamim, great Tzaddikim in the generation, only they were what you would call, maybe only they were the only ones that are called B'nai Aliyah. So then he said, I heard that Reb Kook said that to Reb Yehuda. He said, if there are 1,000 B'nai Aliyah, we're among them. If there's 100, we're among them. If there's 2, it's us. So I love that. That's fascinating, because that's what I see in Rav Kook and Reb Yehuda. I see they had a bigger view. They had a sort of prophetic view of what's going on, how to understand our generation. So that's the shtickle prophecy.
Can we say that the B'nai Aliyah are like most close to what we had with prophecy?
Yeah. That's the idea. Because it's the same idea, like a prophet could predict the future. A prophet could tell us what Hashem wants from us right now when nobody else can. When everything's confusion. A prophet could say, no, this is what Hashem wants. And Babylon wants us to surrender into the Babylonians. To the Greeks, we got to fight. So that's only a prophet could know. And so the same thing now, with the situation we're in now. So you have Rav Kook from Sichot, this is what Hashem wants, and other people can't see it. So that's called B'nai Aliyah. That's what it seems to me. Yeah.
It could have been wrong, even if it was the prophecy to say this is what Hashem wants. Give up the Beis Hamikdash.
Yeah.
You could say. It's not sanctifying God's name not to fight for the Beis Hamikdash.
Okay, that's interesting. So that's maybe what other people thought. But if you look at the verses over there, you'll see that the ones that didn't listen to him got in more and more trouble, and they got more and messed up, and it wasn't a good idea. And the ones that did listen to Yirmiyahu, so everything worked out. And after 70 years, they returned, which he also predicted. So he was miles ahead of them, and so you see the whole story. If you didn't see the story, you could say what you're saying, but it doesn't come out like that.
So I'm missing a few pieces.
Yeah, the whole picture. It comes clear that not only did it work the way he said, it worked altogether like he said. That this was the right thing, So that's the idea of prophecy. Prophecy is something very, very amazing, yes.
So you can say like a B'nai Nevuah, a B'nai Nevi'im, the sons of the prophet. I like people on a lower level than Nevuah.
Yeah.
So B'nai Nevuah is the level called below.
A little bit of prophecy. It's like.
And that exists still?
That still is, yes. Okay, the nation as a whole is called B'nai Nevi'im. Sometimes we have an intuition as a nation, which is like a little bit transcendent, or maybe a lot transcendent.
Like spiritual dreams.
Spiritual, not dreams. Level. No, I wouldn't call that dreams. I would call it a vision. They see something that other people don't see. It's like someone's on this top floor that sees. So, like in other words, so
things happen, kind of
sees what needs to be done.
Also,
like that.
Like they see the outcome of things before they happen.
Or they see how we should conduct ourselves. Like for example, like where do we, let's go upstairs. We go upstairs to the base medrash, right? Now, where'd you get this base medrash from? Who invented the base medrash? That we have this system, that we have this room full of svarim, there are people sitting in chavrusas, and they're learning like this, and all the difference in classes and chavrusas, and all those things.
It was a vision, but
It
not
was
a literal vision.
the Jewish nation invented it. It came out of the nation. You know, it came out of the leadership, and the nation took hold of it, and we have it till today. So that shows we're B'nai Nevi'im, that we could. I told my father was a professor of education, and when I described the base of medrash to him, you know, how it works, he said, "Oh, that's optimal education. You can't beat that." You know, it's Ruach HaKodesh that we came up with. All of our minhagim, all of our customs, you know, our attitudes, they're formed. So yeah.
So you think it's top-notch pedagogy? Is it pedagogy or pedagogy?
I think that. Yeah, go ahead.
So he thinks that your father thinks that Beit HaMikdash is a
Base of medrash. Yeah, the way we learn upstairs,
Beit HaMidrash.
as opposed to like schools with rows and the way they do it. Like, this is much higher, you know. So yeah.
Question: the Bnei Aliyah, like I guess they're supposed to be public figures and also leaders of the Jewish nation, because they have this overview and
That's what's going to happen. They're going to have to tell other people because they see things other people don't. That's true.
So we can expect that
They'll be the leaders.
They are going to be public figures at one point.
I would think so.
Manifest themselves to show themselves.
I would think so. Yeah, I would think it's interesting.
Is there anything like how we can identify them before they are public?
I don't know. I think the main thing is we have to, when most of the sages of the generation identify someone who's above all the rest of them.
Yeah.
You know, that's a good sign. You know, and the people also seeing it is also a good sign. But
So
you need both.
So kind of two questions. So the first one is regarding Bnei Nevi'im. The reason that Am Yisrael is known as Bnei Nevi'im is because we have
A transcendent intuition, like a little bit of prophecy. We have, and sometimes, like, let's say when the halacha is not clear. I just learned this morning. When sometimes the sages are arguing over halacha, so they say, well, let's see what the Jewish people ended up doing, and that's going to determine the halacha, because as if the Jewish nation is with this sage with the Ruach HaKodesh, with this lofty understanding of what's exactly like, when all the sages can't figure it out, you go to the Jewish nation because they're like the sons of Nevi'im.
So we have precedent from actual de facto Jewish practice.
Yeah, that's one example. There are many examples of the prophecy that pervades the Jewish nation.
So you would say that this transcendent intuition constitutes
like
a watered down.
Yeah, a small form of prophecy that could exist even in the galut, you know. And then when you get back to as things get better, as we come back and things reform, then we're going to get back prophecy again. And Rav Kook considered that something imminent. We could get a prophet at some point, you know.
So when the sages could not leave Sokim, they would go to the Jewish nation
and see what are they doing.
I see.
Isn't that amazing?
So, I'm so sorry. About your father, he said that it was the Beit Midrash is much better than like a regular school. What's like the psychological?
Why is it brilliant? The base midrash.
Why is it bad? Why is it better?
I think I just on one foot. I think because the way everybody interacts with each other, and there's independence, and there's this, nobody's like preached to. You know, nobody's being forced. It's sort of this voluntary. Everybody come and like everybody's doing it. Like when they're talking with their partner, all that stuff. My father loved all that. You know.
So there's less hierarchy and more There's less hierarchy and it's more voluntary.
That's part of it, and it goes way beyond that also.
It's also really efficient. Can you imagine that someone who's been learning something for many years in yeshiva teaches someone who may have missed all that, who's just coming new?
Right. They trade off. Yeah.
And that person who has missed all that time in yeshiva may have learned from elsewhere externally.
You know, there's one exception to.
How's it more efficient? Like I agree with you about one of those.
Okay, all right. That's just an example. We could talk about different, but yeah,
But let me say, like the verse in Yeshaya, where it talks about, in the last days, Zion shall be the highest mountain, and the davar shall come from Zion, from Jerusalem, and the Torah. That's an allusion to prophecy, because they say like Torah is allusion to that the Sanhedrin going to be reestablished again, but the davar, that's an allusion to the prophecy that's going to be fixed again.
I'm not sure. I'm not sure what you're referring to. It sounds right. I think you're saying the right thing. I'm not sure.
Do you know which pasuk I mean?
No, I don't.
Pasuk is in two chapters, in Yeshaya and Micha.
Show me later. I'm not sure. I just want to say it's interesting thing. There's one exception. Like, so we're saying, where does this prophecy come from? So my answer is the same as the answer the whole time. How does the Jewish nation have prophecy and other nations don't have it? You know, where does it happen? So it happens from this historical process that Hashem created us through going out of Egypt, through getting the Torah, through getting the Mishkan, all that created a national soul which is so high it can get prophecy. It goes above the reasonable. It goes I'm not saying reasonable. It goes above rationality in normal sense. Who can predict the future accurately? That's something that's amazing, you know. Did I finish this piece?
No.
I'm in the middle. Going further. Anu Am HaNevuah. Going for a third line. We are the nation of prophecy. Am bo mithalchim nevim uvnei nevim. A nation that they travel within it, prophets and the sons of prophets. Anu Am shel nevim. We are a nation of nevim. Am sheshayach lidveikut elokit shel chalut hashchina. We're the nation that is, it pertains to us, the clinging, the divine clinging, the divine connection of the divine presence coming into us. For Tesa'eni Ruach, as it's described in the prophet, that the Spirit picked me up, and I had a vision of the angels saying Kadosh, Kadosh, all that. So that's prophecy. That a person's spirit can be picked up above the normal level. We have this transcendent, really transcendent ability of prophecy. That's in us. Zos Metziot Shel Kesher Eloki. This is an existence of a connection, a divine connection. Erech Uvadati, it's a level, shall connect. We're connected with Rebbeinu Shalom on a very high level that we could even come to prophecy. So there's a connection here which goes way beyond what other nations are connected to. We're online. We can somehow get this messages come into our minds which are beyond what a regular person has ability to perceive. Some people say, is Judaism rational? There's a discussion of rational Judaism. So the answer is yes, Judaism is rational, even though prophecy is not rational. But we are rational because prophecy is recorded. It happened.
Judaism is multifaceted in different versions.
Right, but it's not irrational. We're not superstitious. But it's not superstitious to believe in prophecy because the whole Torah describes to us prophecy. This true Torah describes how there was prophecy throughout the generations. So it's not irrational to believe that because you see that the Torah is so full of truth. Not only that, we can see prophecy coming out. We can see that Moshe Rabbeinu predicted before we went to Eretz Yisrael, we're eventually going to do sins and get sent into exile to all the corners of the earth. We're going to be brought back. So prophecy happened, and it is happening. So prophecy, it's rational to believe in prophecy. Prophecy itself is super rational. But, okay, so that's prophecy. That's what I wanted to, that's what, I wanted to add one thing. It looks like I'm not going to finish the last one. Maybe I'll wait till next week also to do Kedusha. The last one's really big. So I wanted to say one thing, interesting thing. So from who we are, from our national history, from our national characteristics, we got from the Avot and through Hashem built us through our history. Mm-hmm. So we have this divine soul, this national soul, could be a divine soul also, this national Jewish soul, which is capable even of prophecy, right? Now other nations don't have that. Other nations have other characteristics. They don't have this kind of stuff. Now there's one exception, which is Bilam, right, that we know about. At least one exception. It was Bilam was a prophet from the nations, and apparently, and so how could that happen? If Bilam wasn't connected to this grid that we're connected to, he didn't have the national consciousness that we've had through our history and through Hashem building us to this place. So how could he have prophecy? How does that make sense?
It's on the other side.
So, okay, but how could prophecy be from the other side? That would be called witchcraft. That would be called something else. But the Torah calls it prophecy, and it's written in the Chumash, and it's considered prophecy what he predicted. So he got prophecy. Bilam seemed to have gotten prophecy.
Well, all our forefathers, they were pre the Exodus, so all of them are also prophets from before the nations. You could say. Oh,
so it started with the Avot. You're saying.
As long as they're God-fearing.
The three of them were the Avot.
Right.
I'm not sure if the Shvatim were prophets.
Sarah was prophetess.
Sarah, the Yemot also, yes, correct. But so they were. So that was something already. It was the beginning, because they were contained. I'll call Yisrael inside them. Yeah. So they had the Kedusha from. They were prophets also. But then after that, there wasn't prophecy until you had Am Yisrael.
Right, but where did Aharon himself get it from?
So that's a divine creation.
Divine.
That's divine creation.
Another thing was from his own understanding as well, because he was able to understand from such.
No, I don't think so. Yehuda says not like that. No, he said it wasn't from his understanding. It was from he was given this unusual soul, an unusual desire to find the truth, and that was all a gift. It wasn't really, he didn't really earn that, but he pursued it, and then came down prophecy to him. So it came as, it's really all Hashem in a way. Afterwards, he developed his characteristics, and that had a lot of, more of the choice comes afterwards, it seems to me, that he developed his wisdom and his and his different midot and all that kind of stuff. But the best essential prophecy, it seems like that that was part of the divine plan. Like he made a different kind of creature called Aharon Avinu.
Because he's the prototype, right? Where
Yeah.
we are like the
Yeah.
copycats of
Yeah.
everything what we have is
Right.
inside him.
Exactly. So what about Bilam? How did Bilam get prophecy? That's a question. So actually, I saw something about this. I'm pretty sure this is not me. I'm pretty sure I saw this, but this is what I remember. This is what I think. What happened with Bilam is, or maybe it's partly me. This is what I think. Bilam, what he was cursed. He was able to curse people, right? He was a cursor. He was really rotten, and they would hire him, and he would curse different entities, and they would wither, So he was really popular, If you want to get rid of your enemies, you hire Bilam, and he curses them. That's it, So that's what Balak did. He wanted to curse, wanted Bilam to curse the Jewish people and get rid of us. So it seems to me that that's not prophecy, that he can predict who's going to fall apart. He's making it happen. He's a psychologist. Very simple to me. He was a psychologist. If you go and you say with a lot of conviction and strength and convincingness and brilliance how bad something is till they believe you, then they're in bad shape. When a person believes that a certain self-definition, right? So then that's gonna be his downfall.
It's just science that we use.
It's yeah,
The
exactly.
the-
Psychology,
Yeah, it's
right?
psychology.
But however, that was until a certain point. But then at a certain point, what happened is a miracle happened. This was a one-time miracle.
So okay. So,
I think this is maybe Or Chaim says this. Somebody says this, that a miracle happened. What happened was after all this, he was trying to curse us, and he's really good at that. But he couldn't find anything. He had trouble. When he's looking at this Jewish nation, this Jewish soul,
There was no weakness.
there's no weakness. Not really. There was nothing there. This is this divine presence that fills the Jewish nation. He couldn't find the weakness. So he kept trying all his tricks, and he couldn't find that weakness to curse us with. So after a while, when he kept trying, something happened. Something miraculous happened because he was connecting to the Jewish people in that way. He got prophecy. All of a sudden, some kind of a miracle fluke happened. I shouldn't call it a fluke, but something very, very out of the ordinary happened. That prophecy only comes to the Jewish nation. But in this situation, he was the opposite of us. He was the lowest of the lows, but he was brilliant. He was the biggest psychologist, and he was the best at finding faults and bringing them out in order to bring someone down. He couldn't find the fault, and he was focusing on the Jewish nation until something happened. The prophecy came into him, and he started to predict what's going to happen to all the nations and to the Jewish nation, and those predictions are written in the Torah. They're actual prophecy. So this is an exception. So it's a wild story.
So
But
it's a matter of he tried to influence people to make them go down. Instead, he was influenced himself.
and something
got to a higher
happened.
level.
And then afterwards, he went back to his old ways, and he gave the advice how to bring down the Jewish people with sending in the prostitutes, and getting them to fall in that way and do sins. And so yeah, the ones from Midian, he sent them in to actually bring us down, and that was a really good idea. He was so evil. He knew how to find people's weakness, and he brought us down that if he gets us to sin, then we're going to become weak. And so he did that afterwards. He was really bad, but at that moment, it was just a divine thing coming from us into him, this prophecy. So it's an amazing exception. So anyway, then it's another one of the prophets. So except for that, that's the only exception, and it also comes because of us. But it's the fourth highest one that Rabbi Yehuda is describing of the characteristics of the Jewish nation. Now the highest one after that. So this is really interesting also. And I want a lot to say about it. This is really deep. And I'm going to stop today. I'll continue next week. Even though we're starting Parshas Vayikra, I wanted to finish, but maybe I'll start with this and I'll go into Vayikra next week. It's Hashem. But let me just say what it is. The next one is Kedusha. The highest one of the 5 midas that he's describing, the particular midot of Am Yisrael, above prophecy, is what he calls Kedusha, holiness. There's something in the Jewish nation has something called Kedusha.
Above prophecy.
Moshe?
Huh?
Moshe Rabbeinu?
No, the Jewish nation. The Jewish nation
It
has
was above everyone. Then being a
not Damosh Rabbeinu, Kedusha, the property of holiness, the characteristic of being holy, which is a lousy word because it's a translation, But the word Kedusha,
Purity, maybe.
I'll explain a little what it is. Kedusha, that is something the Jewish nation has, and no other nation has as a nation, that's for sure. Individuals, I'm not sure, but the Jewish nation has as a nation, and it's called Kedusha. Now the word Kedusha, let me just explain a little bit of the word Kedusha. Next week I'll explain the psukim a little more, I'll explain it much better. But Kedusha, the word Kadosh means set aside. It means distinct. It means not pulled after
Distinguished.
Influences. It means it influences, but it's not influenced. It means it's separate. It's something which is, so Kedusha is something that it's similar to the way Hashem is. Hashem is not influenced by anything. He's not lacking anything. But he gives life and gives existence to everything else. So Hashem is Kadosh because he is completely transcendent, not affected by things. Same thing, the Jewish nation is like that. We have an ability to be separate from nature and influencers, and not so much influenced, and set aside for, it's sort of separate in a certain sense. So that's Kedusha. That's the highest level of the Jewish nation. Okay, we'll talk more next week.
So, what was the adjective your father used?